It's almost impossible to
Yeah.
make money that way. We have no dreams of doing that, and therefore our balance sheet looks amazing. I mean, we take very little risk. It's not our airplane. We don't want to buy that airplane, but if you want to buy that airplane, then we want to manage it for you and be the best steward of your money that we can be.
Welcome to Price Discovery, Money and Mindset. Go under the hood with Jordan Rodriguez, a certified financial planning professional and certified exit planning advisor, as he explores the art of balancing wealth with personal fulfillment. We'll hear strategies and stories from industry experts, business owners, and thought leaders about navigating the complexities of high net worth families and businesses. Without further ado, here's Jordan Rodriguez.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Price Discovery, Money and Mindset. I've got another in-person interview this week with Corey Head, the president of SkyQuest, a Cleveland-based private jet company. I really enjoyed listening to Corey's insights about how the cross-section of safety and a premium client experience has allowed him to differentiate his company from the others in his space. He also talks a lot about common sense ownership and how that's allowed him to grow his business from one employee and one jet to over 130 employees and 20 plus planes over the course of the past couple of decades. I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Well, Corey Head, SkyQuest, thank you so much for, look, I got to be honest with the audience about what happened. I was going to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for rejoining us. We initially recorded a couple of months ago, and look, I'm not a professional podcast host. I do have a day job. We recorded a great episode. I sent it off to the producer, and he responded. He said, the video looks great. Would you mind sending me Corey's audio file? And I knew immediately before I even responded, my heart sank. I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. There's no audio file. Turned out, as we were just testing everything, that one of our computers just doesn't have a good relationship with the mic input. You were so kind to now come into the office a second time and re-record this episode with me. So I just have to let the audience know, Corey, all-time good guy, in addition to being a great business owner. But I have to be fully transparent with the listeners. This is round number 2.
Let's just hope this turns out like some of my second putts that I take. Okay, maybe I learned something in the first one, but probably not. And it's no problem at all. Listen, if anything, we're such so we get so dependent on IT, and computers and stuff like that, and it's complicated, and if it doesn't work right, it can throw everything off. So listen, like I said, it's probably a bonus for me. I'm happy to have a half hour conversation with you, Jordan. So thank you again for having me back.
Awesome. Well, we're going to start the same way we did last time. It's always useful for the listeners to have context about the size and scope of SkyQuest, if you could share with us.
Sure. So it's, I started the company about 25 years ago now, where a gentleman had an airplane or a family and a business, and he wanted someone to fly that airplane around. And so I was like, yeah, I'll take the job. And it was like your typical pilot job. It was, on the clock all the time, but you're really only flying maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. You
right.
End up with a lot of downtime, and it's not totally your schedule, but still it's super fun when you go flying and stuff. So I did that for like a year or so while trying to think of what else I could do to maybe supplement my income. And then I kind of came up with a cool idea, and I thought, well, geez, we have this asset here and you're not using it 50 or 60 or 70% of the time. So let's create a charter company with it. So I worked with the FAA and worked with a couple of different planners and thought this makes sense. And I wasn't telling him that it was going to make money on year 1 or year 5, but I knew for a fact that every trip we did would offset his expense. And quite frankly, that's what we still do today for 20 plus airplanes, 20 plus jets that we manage right now. So that's the scale of it. We have 130 employees, give or take. We have about 70 full-time pilots. And we manage and operate for the owners. And when they're not using them, then we put our charter client base in those airplanes that we've had and grown for like 25 years now. So it's kind of a win-win. What I try to tell people when they're coming to me like, well, how does this work? And I'm like, well, if you buy an airplane, you're basically going to have 95% availability.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, our company, there's a model called like a floating fleet where you just kind of leave the plane on the road for like a week, and then you just hope to sell something from near where you are to some other destination. Where we we always fly the planes back to Cleveland. Like we're looking for business travel. We're looking for, people that want to go to Nashville for a 3-hour meeting and come back home. We're looking for people that want to get dropped off in Florida. And at that point, we try to jump across to the other side of Florida and sell that to somebody else that's trying to go from the other side of Florida, maybe up to Pittsburgh, something that really makes sense. And we try to drum up efficiency with your airplane when you're not using it. But, if you need it, it's, you basically, we wouldn't be in business very long if every time you needed your airplane, I was like, oh no, I'm sorry, it's out doing a trick for Billy Thompson.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, when you need it, it's there for you. When you approve of us chartering it, then we'll charter it out and take good care of it. Because the other great thing is we know the client base, right? This isn't like, we're in Vegas and we just picked up this last minute trip and it's 10 people trying to go to LA. That's not what we do. It's a family of 4. It's 4 business men and women trying to go to New York City for a day or two. And so since we know them, we can take very good care of the airplane.
I was surprised by a lot of the nuances about the business model that I really didn't understand. Probably made for a pretty annoying playing partner when we first met on the golf course. I was picking your brain about how SkyQuest worked and operated. Mm-hmm. One of the unique things that I didn't understand that I'd love you to explain to the audience is what's owned on the balance sheet versus what's not, how that's beneficial to the owners, how that's beneficial to you. And really, the mental model I used was you really have 2 different sets of clients/customers. There's the people who own the jets and there's people who fly on them. And yes, you're going to have some overlap, but there are people who, I'm assuming, fly with you plenty and don't actually own any of the jets, and vice versa. People who probably spend more time having you cart people around in their jets and they're not on them all the time.
Right. Yeah. And listen, I've been doing this now for 25 years. And I guess for the first 5, I thought, gosh, if I could just buy my own airplane or whatever, then I could keep the lease income or whatever. And I could, fly that thing every single day. But I promise you, there's so many people that do this every day. And anybody who's paying attention to any sort of news at all realizes that Wheels Up or some of these other people that are trying to buy the airplanes, finance them, maintain them, to crew them and all that stuff. It's almost impossible to make money that way. So we have no dreams of doing that. And therefore our balance sheet looks amazing. I mean, we take very little risk. It's not our airplane. We don't want to buy that airplane. But if you want to buy that airplane, then we want to manage it for you and be the best steward of your money that we can be. We're going to hire the crew. We're going to do all the maintenance on it. We're going to make sure that this thing's totally safe and in compliance to the best of our ability so that you can fly on it. But at the end of the day, we don't necessarily have any dreams of buying airplanes. I just don't think that model works. It could maybe work on a very small scale, but on a grand scale where you got 10 or 12 airplanes and you're borrowing money, or even just if you want to consider a cost of capital of having it invested in this airplane versus in the market or something, it really gets cost prohibitive. So what we do is, they have to have the need for the airplane. I don't care if they finance it, pay cash for it, doesn't matter. I'll give them a recommendation of people that I trust that do aircraft financing that have the best rates. So they can look at that if they'd like. But that's their airplane. It's on their balance sheet, and therefore they get the tax advantages associated with it, which is usually quite lucrative.
Yeah.
Last year, under the Trump organization, it was 100%. So whether you have a really good year or you make X per year, you can write off 100% of the value of that airplane in 1 year. So if you're in a 40% tax bracket, that's
compelling.
That's some cash savings.
Sure.
And this year too, it's gone down, I think, to 80%. But it's 20% in year 2. So therefore, as long as you're keeping it for 2 years,
exactly,
it's 100% tax write-off. So they enjoy that. I don't enjoy any of that, since I don't own the asset. But yes, we fly for them. And then, the neat thing about our company is no matter how much you fly, I think SkyQuest is the right choice if you're in Cleveland. And we can talk about efficiencies for sure. I'd love to talk about that. But if you're going to do 1 or 3 trips a year, you don't want to pay $250,000 for a jet card, and you don't want to buy into a 16th of a share of an airplane, and you don't want to own your own airplane. What you'd like is like, how much is that trip? Oh, that trip's $12,000. Okay, how do I pay? You pay when you're done and you're satisfied. Okay, I'll do it. Done. So we send you a bill. You're a local Cleveland business person. It's got a great reputation. You came recommended. We fly the trip. Once you're happy, we send you the bill. You pay it. Nothing else.
Beautiful.
It's great. And there's a lot of people, trust me, that can justify that for probably 1 trip every 2 weeks. you still don't really need to buy into a share of an airplane. And
Yeah, do you have any like mental break points that you recommend to people once you fly X amount of times per year, it's time to move from phase 1 to phase 2 and then phase 2 to phase 3, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, I can probably just speak for SkyQuest, but I can promise you that it's pretty true across the industry. If you're going to fly 3 or 4 trips a year, I would do what we consider ad hoc, like retail charter.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really join anything, buy anything. It just gives you maximum flexibility. You don't have to worry about somebody being a poor steward of your $250,000 that's supposedly sitting in a bank account somewhere. You know what I mean? We know too many companies that use that to make payroll with the intent to make it back someday, and it never gets there, right?
Oh, okay.
That's not what SkyQuest does. We keep all of that money totally separate. We would never spend it on anything else. So if something happens and people recall their money, we have all that money to give them back. In exchange for giving us that money, we'll give them a 10 to 15% discount. So now if you start hitting 5 to 20 trips a year, whatever, you probably want to join a program.
Okay.
Because really, you're going to save more money at the end of the year.
And a program's like one of the jet card programs?
Correct.
Okay.
And this gives you guaranteed pricing and guaranteed availability on like 3 days notice. Because there is a time, if you're just a retail charter client, you call me for tomorrow, I could go, you know what, I'm sorry. Or if you call me for 3 days from now, every plane's booked. I don't have anything. We would never do that. We might go outside of our fleet with someone that we trust and find you another option. So we would never do that. But it's possible. Whereas if you're a Jet Club or a Jet Card member with us and you prepay for hours or you pay an annual subscription fee, if you prefer to keep your cash, you can just pay an annual fee too. So, but if you're one of those groups, you just call up and say, I need to do my drop off in Florida that I do every 4 days, and it's 4 days from now. We say, no problem, sir. You're all set. Or ma'am. And it's on the books at the exact same price that you always got.
Okay.
It's guaranteed pricing and guaranteed availability. The great thing is, quite frankly, if we don't have the light jet that you requested, we're going to upgrade you to like a mid-sized jet and still charge you for the light jet because it's guaranteed pricing and guaranteed availability. And that's one of the benefits.
Sounds like the opposite of flying commercial, right? Like any surprises that you're going to have, it's never an upgrade. It's always going to be a downgrade. It's always going to be a delayed flight. It's always going to be a poor experience instead of a positive one. The different business models just fascinated me when we talked about how there's subscription models and then fractional ownership. When you're adding a plane to your fleet, is it generally somebody already has a plane and you're talking to them about, hey, here's how we can make things more cost efficient? Or is it somebody who's thinking about buying a plane and someone's like, hey, you got to talk to Corey about making these economics make sense for you? Or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, it's more common that it's somebody that's a really great charter client that's spending maybe $500,000 a year.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And then they start looking at it and go, geez, the tax advantages associated with owning it, and now I can drive down my cost of flying around. But again, the last part of maybe the previous question was, you got to fly like 100, 150, 200 hours a year to really justify ownership. There's so many fixed costs associated with it. So people are out there flying 50 hours in a year and at $8,000 an hour, you're like, oh my gosh, this is $400,000. This is crazy. But really the bottom of the aircraft ownership market, if you flew 50 hours in your own airplane, but you had it at your beck and call all the time, you'd probably be looking somewhere in the tune of like $1 million to have this plane at your beck and call.
Yeah.
Now, if you partner with a great aircraft management company, charter company, and you're okay with chartering it out, we offset that expense, by probably 50 or 60%. So we can get that cost down.
Substantial.
Yeah, down closer to 500,000 or 400,000. So now you're like, okay, well, wait, I can control the plane that I'm in all the time, and I get the tax advantages and stuff, and it's going to cost me about the same per year. Okay, maybe I can justify it. But in order to get there, you have to be flying quite a bit. I mean, 50 hours in a year is 5 or 6 hours a month. That's 2 or 3 trips almost every single month. So it's quite a bit of flying.
Before we actually dive into the company itself and growth and everything like that, I want to talk about what is very unique to you. I had the privilege of being able to fly on one of your planes a couple of years ago. The customer experience is second to none. Can you talk about how, the type of client that you serve, it's not going to be the average person walking around, but then B, how you've tailored the client experience to really wow the people that are coming to your hangar and flying with you.
Right. And yeah, I think a lot of people do what we do, right? And especially if you're going on one-way type travel and you just need to get dropped off in Naples, you can call I call brokers or whatever. They're kind of like working out of maybe a single office, or out of the back of their pickup truck for that matter, and they're just trying to find the lowest bidding, airplane through their network that they can find to put you on it so they can maximize their margins, and That's not what we do at all. You know what I mean? Our value to our clients is we have a specific list of people that we trust. I mean, obviously we're number one on the list. We want to put you in our airplanes at all times. And by doing that, we can control the service around it. We can control the timing. You know, if somehow we have a mechanical or an issue that plane comes in the night before, it's not 100%, you'll just see a tail number change. We'll go into the hangar where we have 20 other jets. We'll grab a different airplane. And since we have a lot of the same kind of airplanes, we really don't have to switch your crew. So that crew is just going to fly a different airplane. They're going to fly your same trip the next day. You're never even going to notice it happens. But I think, so the service side of things, you know, we have some nice redundancy. You know, since we're based in Cleveland, most of the planes are in the hangar. We don't deal with a lot of the stuff that other people do. They have to come in the day before if they're going to fly you and you're not flying with SkyQuest. They're dealing with inclement weather. They're dealing with freezing cold temperatures like it is today. You know, a lot of other stuff that they really can't control because they just don't have the resources that we have here at Cleveland Hopkins. But yeah, we want to like go to the next level. We really want to learn about you, you know, kind of like we can, if you say you like blueberry muffins or whatever, sometimes those are hard to get at different stuff. And you got to pay $75 for some catering company to go find the thing and deliver it over there. We have people in Cleveland. We can have blueberry muffins on every single one of your flight. It costs us nothing. We're not even going to charge you for it, you know? But that little thing where you're like, God, I love these things. And it's always sitting by my seat when I show up. And you're allowed to drive out to the ramp because we can control the ramp really, you know? And then when you leave, we can wash your car for you because we control the hangar, right? So you get back and it's like, man, they put gas in my car. You know, they washed my car. They pulled it up to the airplane. And when you get out, you walk out of this trip, which was really expensive. We flew you from A to B and back to A. And you get out and you get in your car and it's nice and warm and it's clean. And it's just this amazing feeling, right? And I hate to say it, but if you just put yourself in somebody else's shoes and it's kind of like you get off of some A-list charter company and they flew you perfectly from A to B, okay? But you get out in Cleveland Hopkins over the past 2 weeks and basically out there in the parking lot is your car because you've been gone for 2 days and it's buried under 6 inches of snow.
Salty.
And it's salty and it's freezing freaking cold and your shoes are soaked because you're stepping through 6 inches of snow to get to your car. That
it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. What's the last thing you remember about that trip, right?
I totally agree. You know, and they're like, and especially if you actually can compare it to SkyQuest, and you're like, my gosh, SkyQuest would never do this. I mean, quite frankly, I don't, you know, it's not my job to clean your car off and do all that stuff, but we can control it and we've made it part of our job. And once people get used to that, so that's what we want. We wanted to show people the difference of flying with SkyQuest versus flying with other operators. And the other big thing, quite frankly, is the value. I mean, people call it the value proposition that we have. And again, we're based in Cleveland. So we're not catering. Like, I'm not selling jet cards to somebody that lives in, you know, Kansas City, Missouri. I'm just not doing that because we can't control everything out there. We'd be the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. We want to be better. We want to go to the next level. So if you live within about 200 miles of Northern Ohio and Cleveland, and we can control the service and keep you in our airplanes the majority of the time, that's the client we want. So, and by doing that, we have a lot less reposition legs. So we don't have to, and that's the way a lot of these models are built. You want to just get short reposition legs and long legs that people are on, and that creates some efficiency. Well, with SkyQuest, you know, we're not repositioning anywhere for the most part. And if we are, we might reposition to Cowga County or maybe up to Erie, PA or something like that to pick you up because we have a lot of clients up in the Erie, PA market. But we're not repositioning from here to St. Louis and then to fly you from St. Louis to Kansas City and then hoping like heck we can find another trip. Otherwise, we got a deadhead back to Cleveland. There's no efficiency in that.
It's the money, yeah.
And you can think that you're not paying for it. You're only paying for your occupied hourly rate. But some of these occupied hourly rates now are $10,000 an hour. $15,000 an hour. So somebody's paying for it.
Well, if we zoom out and we talk about kind of the history of the company, where you've come from, you gave us some numbers earlier on. Basically went from one person, one plane to 20 plus planes and 130 plus people. Growth takes a bunch of different trajectories. I love your analysis about how growth happened over different phases and then end with telling us what life cycle or what phase in the life cycle SkyQuest is in right now in 2026.
Sure. I would call it, you know, almost all of it has been organic. We, at one time, over 25 years, we basically purchased a local broker, that didn't even have any airplanes or anything, but they had a nice book of business and they were retiring. So that's about the only expansion that we've done other than in-house, organic, word of mouth, taking care of people and having them communicate at the driving range the next day or at the business meeting the next day of what they did the day before and how they got from A to B and back to A. And it was just an amazing experience. That's how we've expanded. And obviously to get from 50,000 in sales our first year to almost 100 million, 24 years later, we've had some amazing growth. But what I've tried to tell people is we don't drop ship t-shirts. We don't necessarily sell pizza. There's a lot of safety and regulation in what we do. So we've been very careful to control the growth. I think with, maybe some of our best years, at most you might have seen 30%, sort of growth. This is not some exponential. We're growing 200 or 300%. And I don't know if we could have and maintained the level of safety and security and service that we want to maintain here at SkyQuest. So it's been a balance. We've had several opportunities to manage airplanes that were maybe manufactured in the 80s, but you got to take my crew member, and I'm like, well, I interviewed him. We're out. This is outside of our comfort zone. We're not going to do this. So we've really tried to pick and choose our clients, well, and for that reason, we've seen very, very steady growth. I think other than COVID, like a lot of companies, and I think we were mostly flat that year, which would be basically 2020. We've had growth every single year for 25 years, which is amazing. And once you get to a company, at least in my opinion, in our industry that's this large, and we'll just say almost 100 million or something like that, it's hard to grow by 30%, sure. Right? I mean, unless you're buying other companies that do what you do, it's very difficult. So we had about 14% growth last year. I think that's probably, if I had to guess where I'd like it, I would seriously pick that.
Okay.
So in terms of business, the standard business life cycles, we're probably just between, kind of growing and mature, really. I like the mature stage for us. I think if we could continue to grow at a 10% rate and consistently deliver on service and safety and stuff, I would call that a big success for our company.
Yeah, I feel like for your business model and what you've built, mature is kind of how you've always had to operate. You've talked about the service being super important, and you just started talking about safety. There's probably no other industry that safety is more important than what we're talking about right here. You gave me, I wouldn't call it an anecdote, just sort of an idea. I give you the dumb example. Oh, my wife is concerned about hearing on the news that private planes, anytime you hear a bad story, and you took me through how, okay, well, those weren't FAA charter regulated planes. Talk to the audience about the difference between somebody flying their own rickety and what you've got going and how important safety is to your business model.
It is. There's truth to it. I mean, I don't like to talk about it either. It scares the heck out of me. And you're spot on that this thing is only as good as our reputation in the last flight that we had. And we take that very, very seriously. The pilots that we hire, everybody's captain qualified. Even the people sitting in the right seat have what we call PIC, pilot command type ratings in these airplanes. And the reason we do that is because if they say, hey, I'm not happy, with, what's going on here, we should divert to an airport, or we should go around, or we should abort this takeoff or whatever, we want people to listen. And if you look at a lot of old, accident transcripts and stuff, people knew weird stuff was going on and no one just spoke up when they should have spoke up. And if they would have, the outcome could have been totally different. But yes, there's, without getting too far into the weeds, if you own your own airplane, even if it's a 172 or a G550 or whatever, like a beautiful, gorgeous airplane, and you order it, you own your own and you're not on a charter certificate, your regulations are very lax. The FAA is like, if you would like to work 18 hours in a row, go ahead. If you would like to land at a runway that's not, that's basically at the minimum required by the manufacturer, go ahead. Mm-hmm. If you would like to fly 12 hours in a day, go ahead. When you put it on a 135 charter certificate, which is what we have, now we have FAA oversight, a lot of FAA oversight. And what they do is they're out there looking out for the general public, right? And they're saying the most you can fly is 8 hours in a day, single pilot. And if you have two pilots, it's 10 hours in a day. They determine that after that, you can no longer continue to be as safe as they would like you. You can work only a 14-hour day. So if we start at 6 a.m., we have to be done at 8 p.m. It's kind of think of it like a trucker. They just can't keep driving. There has to be mandates on these. Now, if I own my own F-150, I could drive all the way across the country. And I think a lot of our families have probably done this, right? Like my dad has stayed up for 24 hours straight driving us to St. Petersburg, Florida. You know,
That's my father-in-law.
yeah. So it can be done and no one says a word. But if your dad was driving for a commercial service, okay, there would have to be a spot in North Carolina where they switch drivers. And then your family gets put on with a new driver that had theoretically just slept in a hotel and is now fresh to go. So anyways, very similar. You know, we have to land in like 60% of the runway. So if I run all the numbers in my plane, it says, oh, geez, snow's contaminated and you got a tailwind and whatever these things are, the computer says, well, you need 6,000 feet. So I have to land, I need a runway that's about 10,000 feet long because they're putting the safety factor in there for you. So it's nice for people to know that. I think a lot of people are like, well, I got to do my own, safety checks. But the FAA there, if you have a 135 or even what the airlines are operating on, what's called 121, they're subject to the exact same things. Exact same requirements. Some of them a little bit more strict, some of them a little bit less strict, but very, very similar to the same stuff that we deal with.
Yeah.
So we're happy to do it. I mean, honestly, the parts that go into airplanes, the blessing of that specific airplane by the FAA before it's even charterable. If somebody gives me an airplane, I can't charter that airplane out for probably 90 days.
Okay.
So I have to run my whole team through the logbooks, the parts inventory, all this stuff to verify that all these parts have traceability, that all these parts were of known entity, things like that. And then the FAA comes out and verifies it.
When we first got together and I asked if you would come on the podcast, I always like to have sort of a loose theme. And I thought a really good theme for this conversation was what we called common sense ownership, because I started rattling off questions that you're going to have to ask my CFO, blah, blah, blah. I started out as a pilot. I always wanted to fly, and I built this business based around making this a place that pilots want to fly and that people feel safe and have a really good experience. Give the audience a sense of how early you kind of knew what you wanted to do and how your role has evolved from day one, now 25 years later.
Right. Great question. I think, quite frankly, you started to ask me some tough business questions. And I think the only reason I'm here, Jordan, is because of a lot of common sense, treating people the way that I would like to be treated and just making the smartest decisions that I feel like I can make that benefit obviously our passengers and our clients and our employees, but also the company way before they would ever benefit me or some other people that might be a little bit more selfish. So, I've fallen into that. My dad was a school teacher. My uncle was a pilot. My uncle loved his job. My dad kind of grounded out, quite a bit. I always loved to drive things. So I sort of gravitated towards following in my uncle's footsteps, and he flew 747s for Northwest. And I thought, well, geez, I always want to fly for the airlines. Went to college, got all my ratings and stuff, got a 4-year degree. And with the goal of the second I graduated, I think I still wanted to work for, what was Continental back in the day and is now United. That was pretty much the dream. And then I got exposed to private aviation, and I got exposed to Learjets, flying freight around. Because when you have really low time, they make you fly pretty much like empty airplanes because they're like, you haven't proven yourself yet.
Yeah.
So that's another good thing. Our pilots have to have minimum flight hours and minimum experiences and stuff like that. But if you're going to go put a box on an airplane down the street, they're kind of like, that pilot minimum is quite a bit less, because they're like, well, but that's how you prove yourself. We flew all night, every night, 5 nights a week, in these twin engine piston powered airplanes by ourselves.
You kind of liked it though.
I did it. I mean, I like a mission and then to fulfill it, get it accomplished, do it better than other people can do it. That's my whole thing, And so when this guy called me, quite frankly, a guy that we used to do his landscaping, because my dad was a school teacher, so all summer long we'd work separate jobs. He would have a crew and just try to grind it out on his second or third job. And, so I would work with him all the time. And one of these people that we did his dock and put his boat in and did his lawn and stuff, ended up buying an airplane. And I think he knew my work ethic, and so that's how it sort of started. I started working there and he wasn't using the airplane much. And we're right back to the beginning of the story where I'm trying to help this family out. It's a family that I've known, as acquaintances through a couple of different people in aviation. And it seemed to really work out well for everybody. But yes, I mean, my dad, again, I think we got out of the common sense thing. I mean, that's all he just drilled into me.
Yeah.
He's and you do this, if you have your own kids, you're just I can't tell you, too many more times to whatever, shut the door, or put your dish in the dishwasher. I don't know what it is. It's just So my dad would always just be like, just have some common sense. Like no one else wants to pick that stuff up, or we're not heating the outside, and I think forever, that was ingrained in me, and it became to treat, other stuff like it was yours, and I just really try to do that to help all the employees and help the aircraft owners here. I remind them quite a bit that this thing's expensive, and sometimes I want you to buy a better part, because I just don't. This part here is certified, but I can buy the part brand spanking new, for $4,000 more or whatever. This is where I would spend my money, and let them ultimately make the decision. But it comes with recommendations from us as to what we would do if it was our own money.
So you're what's called a technical founder, right? Like what you do is you built a business around what you already did. And there's plenty of people that listen to this podcast, they're business owners. And the story that you're telling, doing something really well, having common sense, building a business from 50,000 to 100 million over the course of a couple of decades resonates with a lot of people. At what point, or there were several, I'm sure, there's got to be different inflection points from 50,000 to 100 million or one employee to 130 employees where you realize it's time to start doing something, whether it's investing in infrastructure, hiring, bringing in different outside counsel, internal counsel. Talk about some of those pivotal moments where you realize, okay, time to hire, time to bring on a new plane, the different signals to you that it was time to do something.
I mean, that's the stuff that somebody like me doesn't know at all. And I only found out because next thing I know, I'm working 14 hours a day. I'm going into the office at like 5 a.m. and I'm working until 7 or 8 o'clock at night because there's no way all this stuff is getting done. And it's not getting done because, I don't know how long it's going to last, and maybe things are going to take a turn, and I don't want it to affect everybody. And I investing $30,000 in X right now, whether it's staff or whether it's software or whatever, seems like a big risk, but it's really about, at some point it becomes about the processes, right? Like, how can we duplicate this? How does this next person that come in to do the stuff that I don't want to do, well, how do they know what to do? And they don't. It's all like just in my brain, or it's in somebody's brain. That was really difficult for me to learn. And I think you're spot on. And now that I know it, I've read so many books that are like pretty much anybody by themselves or with one other person can build a company to like $1 million, and then you have this stage where you hire 3 or 4 people and you turn them over a little bit and you lead with an iron fist and you can maybe get to $10 million or whatever. But like once you start getting past that, it's like a team of people and they have to work together. And we've done a lot of different things. I mean, obviously software nowadays, especially it's almost scary in the future, how much software and AI and the tools that are going to be available to relieve some of these things that we do that we consider like a daily necessity, and yet we're probably not even going to ever do them again. So I'm sort of looking forward to that, but obviously I'm a little bit nervous. But yeah,
we all are.
Yeah. I think until we got to probably about that $10 million stage, and this is a little different because I can only fly so many airplanes. So originally I had to let go and let somebody else fly the other airplane. When we got to 2 airplanes, it's like, I really wanted to make sure, how am I going to vet this person? Do I really trust them and all that stuff? Because this is tons that I've worked for. And now it's in somebody else's total hands, the decisions that they're making and how they're treating these clients and stuff. So that was fun to learn that process, but really identifying what SkyQuest has done in the past and what's made us successful. And then turning that stuff, like we reverse engineered our core values, which I think is just so cool. So like you're like, take 10 of your best employees and like, why are they the best? Oh, it's because he's teachable. Oh, it's because he has integrity. Oh, it's because, he's a team player, whatever, and you look at all these things, you come up with about 50 traits and then you start combining them and narrowing them down and stuff. It was just such a unique exercise for me then to really figure out that if we had 100 people that all did this, we would be in such good shape. So now we have a tool to hire people, right? Again, things I never even thought about when I started this.
Was that an external consultant or something that came in to build that framework? It sounds a lot like EOS.
It's what we have done EOS. I think a majority of this process actually happened before EOS, just from one of our top guys who just was awesome. And he just read about this process and he goes, let's take 10 of us. And it was funny, we went to actually do a go-kart track, I remember. So we let off some steam, we worked in the room and we specifically just worked on this process. But I can't tell, there's been 20 things that have happened like that about just identifying the right people in the right seats. Again, EOS stuff. And I think EOS, it's hard work and it's very, like self-reflective for me. Like I want to point the finger at myself a lot. Like, God, I screwed that up. Gosh, I screwed that up. But at the end of the day, I mean, I was kind of just a pilot. I didn't go to Wharton School of Business or Harvard or something like that. And I'm happy to do it. And I'm privileged to be in a seat. And I think I do a great job, quite frankly. I mean, the company's consistent growth and all that stuff. But I'm in a really unique spot because I'm also the guy who started at the bottom, right? Like, so when I'm talking to one of the pilots, I'm saying, hey, can you work this 5th day in a row? I really apologize. They know that I've done it. You know what I mean? I'm not just sitting up in the ivory tower.
Yeah, it's credibility.
It is. It is. So coming from me, I think they're a lot more excited about going to do it. They're like, no, I know what he's done, and I'm happy to be part of the team. And again, if we hired properly and we're like, tell me about a team experience that you had one time and how it affected you or whatever, they'll go into some story about like, oh, I led this team and people were, not happy, but like no matter what the decision was, we were trying to do this task, and those are the stories you want to hear, right? These are people that are motivated and team players. And so whatever all these core values are, we want to try to hire and quite frankly fire for them too. We'll hold you accountable. Like, hey, you weren't being a team player the other day. This is what happened. This is our opinion. Let us have your side of the story. You know what I mean? And this is the improvements we need going forward, right? And you have 2 or 3 of those conversations and you go, not a good fit.
Yeah. Are there any times where there's big decisions to be made, such as expanding facilities, a major investment where you're bringing in a strategic partner, some sort of outside counsel, whether it's an attorney or a banker or somebody that you work closely with? I don't know if you have a board of directors or anything like that.
We do have a small board. I mean, the ownership structure here is just, 2 people. So there's 3 or 4 of us that meet monthly and look over some of the big items, but for the most part, we've looked at 3 or 4 different companies to potentially, sort of purchase, but we're very conservative. We know what we do well. The last thing that, quite frankly, one of my favorite things about being an aircraft management company like ours is that we have your best interest in mind because we're not selling fuel, right? Like we don't sell gas, but a majority of the people in my situation would own the hangar and they would own the fuel farm and they would own the de-ice fluid and stuff. So if I wanted to, I could just raise the rate, by $1 a gallon. You know what I mean? But now I'm on your team, right? Like it benefits me to negotiate the fuel prices down. It benefits you if I negotiate the fuel prices down. It benefits you if I negotiate the hangar prices down. So I think that's a unique part of SkyQuest where we are aligned with our aircraft owners. A lot of people can't say that. And I've seen a lot of people get taken by that. If you have a maintenance facility, okay, that's whatever, down the street or in the same hangar, the management company's probably going to want you to use their maintenance facility.
Of course. Seems natural.
Seems natural, right? But as an owner, do you look over your shoulder and go, I wonder if I'm getting the best rate? I wonder if I'm getting the most talented, people to work on my airplane. I wonder if I have the best access to parts. Right now, our owners don't wonder that. We put 3 or 4 of the top aircraft, maintenance providers, on a bid for an aircraft. And not necessarily the cheapest one, but the one we kind of trust the most, that has the most capability, that gives us what I think is the best value and the fairest rate, is going to get the job.
It's funny. This happened the first time we spoke, and it's happening all over again. The parallels that I'm drawing in my mind between what you do and what I do, the clientele that we work with, the alignment, making sure that there's no conflict of interest so that people understand we're on their side. We're not selling them fuel. We're trying to find them the best fuel available at the best rate available. I'd be interested to hear, and we touched on this a little bit already, but what you've learned about working with the type of clients that you do work with that might be a misconception to a lot of people. Because I've got plenty on my end. I don't know if you have any, whether they're stories or just lessons learned about working with your clients.
One of my favorite things about the position that I'm in is shaking hands and communicating, even if it's briefly, with some of my clients. These are some of the most amazing, well-trained, charismatic, successful, people that are even in all of Cleveland, you know what I mean? And a lot of people would pay a ton of money to get 10 or 15 minutes with some of these people. And I've played a lot of rounds of golf with local CEOs it's amazing to me, and I probably have 2 or 3 that are, in their 70s or 80s now, and I'll reach out to them and take them out to lunch, and they just love it. And I love to pick their brain and just learn about their perception of maybe the world or this industry or a different industry or whatever. So it's been a humongous perk for me that I don't take lightly. I really, really do appreciate that. I think in any business, you're going to have a couple that maybe you don't get along with, or maybe you don't think are making the same decisions that you would make. But again, it kind of goes back to, who do I want to pick as a partner? This is a pretty big partner for me. You know what I mean? I mean, this is a couple $1 million a year partner, and it has to work for them. And quite frankly, it has to work for us.
Sure.
I'm not just in it for that. And I run this thing. We'll talk to people all the time, and it's just like, if they're super upset that we had to buy some $10,000 part for their airplane, this might not be a partner that I want. Right? Like, okay, like I want the people who are like, listen, my grandkids and my C-suite, my wife, myself, my pilots, whoever, these people are on board that airplane. Now is not the time to skimp on anything when it's sitting on the ground and we can replace it with a part.
Absolutely.
Even if the part's not due for another 100 hours, or it looks like we could get 6 more landings out of those tires or whatever like that. No, we want them replaced. People's grandkids are on board. We take this stuff very seriously, and we're very fortunate. Again, we don't own this plane. In Jordan, it's like, if you had, I don't know how to put it back to what other people deal with every day, but, if you had, a car that you were loaning out to people and they were paying you a small amount per day or whatever, it's a car, so it can stop on the side of the road. And, maybe you would try to get another month out of those tires, even though they were pretty worn, but, in aviation, you can't just pull over.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So, decisions are made every single day that just, that we take the safety is the highest priority.
Yeah.
And we know that our owners appreciate it. And if our owners don't appreciate it, then we probably don't want to partner with them.
We've talked about your growth trajectory and kind of what the next phase looks like. I think I asked you this last time, but if not, has there ever been any thought about, or at least have you been surprised by the Cleveland market in general and how it's been so unsaturated? It seems like you've been able to grow at a 20% clip year over year, staying in Cleveland. That surprises me when I think about it.
Yeah. If I could go back to the early days, I think I had this dream, and it was like on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that I presented to my main partner that's still my partner today. And I said, if we could get to 3 airplanes in this Cleveland market, we would have like a turboprop, and we would have like a Learjet, and we would have like a Challenger, right? And I feel like then, even if the Learjet guy called and the Learjet was busy, but like we could give him a decent deal on the Challenger, like, or he would go backwards to like the King, like we would have something for everybody. And like 3 airplanes in the Cleveland market, I think would be like perfect. You know what I mean? And it cracks me up today. I mean, honestly, when we had 7 airplanes, I was like, holy cow, we have 7 airplanes. When we had 15 airplanes, I was like, oh my gosh, we have 15 airplanes. But, I have a couple of thoughts on this. Number one is we can make aircraft ownership more affordable to a lot of people.
Right.
Again, we get back to that first part of this conversation where I said, having a plane at your beck and calls at a minimum, it's about $1 million a year. So you're okay, $100,000 a month. There's not a ton of people that have $100,000 a month that they're just going to throw out efficiency in their life, But if I can reduce that to $30,000 a month or $40,000 a month or whatever, it's not like there's twice as many people now. There's probably 8 times as many people. Okay.
Really interesting way to think about it.
It is, right? So therefore, instead of having 3 airplanes, we can have 8 times as many because we can drive this cost of ownership down. And I wonder that. I think if for some reason we didn't do charter anymore, if we just said, no, we're fed up with the FAA, we're not going to deal with that oversight anymore, no more charter, I'm pretty sure we would have half the fleet that we have today almost instantly because the cost would go up that much for our owners. And certain owners, at the end of the day, they're business people, right? And so they go, I know it's a little wear and tear on my airplane, and I know it, it might not be available for me 100% of the time, but here's a company that's sort of making me $200,000, $300,000, $600,000 a year without any work from them whatsoever. They're giving up one of their assets a little bit, and a lot of people will refer it to that. It's a tool. And quite frankly, it's a good way of looking at it.
Sure.
If you look at it as like, this thing's my prized possession, all white carpet, all white interior, whatever, you probably don't want people hanging out on the thing. And that's fine too. It's just going to be more expensive for you or your company or your family. So since they're business people, they I think they enjoy that, and I tell people, I'm like, how hard would you have to work or how much oversight would you need to have a company that netted you $500,000 a year?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point.
Yeah. You're going to have to do 5 million in sales. If you do 10% profit margins, and 10% profit margins is a lofty goal. I think 70% of companies don't even make money.
Correct.
so, this is a long process, and we're putting it together for you like instant.
So Cleveland is here to stay, obviously. This is HQ. When we talk about the next phase of SkyQuest, is there any designs to have geographic expansion? Are you going to roll out anything new, or is it really just we want to keep offering people high level of service, high level of safety, and they'll come to us?
For the most part, I love that. We're going to provide high level safety service, and they do usually seek us out. It's pretty rare. Now, we can go out. There's probably another 25 airplanes in the Cleveland Akron market that aren't managed by SkyQuest that I think can benefit from SkyQuest for sure. And I've talked to probably half of them. And for whatever reason, there's some trepidation. And I understand that, you know what I mean? But and most of the time it's like, I just don't want other people in my airplane,
Sure.
And people think of it maybe like a VRBO or something. I don't want people sleeping in my bed. I totally get that. But this isn't your bed. It's not quite like that private and exclusive and stuff like that, So it's and the other neat thing is like, think of a VRBO, but you have the butler in the house, right? Meaning the crew. Like, we're the crew. We're the ones controlling the airplane and what you're doing on it and whether or not you're being disrespectful to the plane and all that stuff. So it's kind of like your VRBO in your house, but you're having a staff of 2 that's sitting there watching everything they're doing. So it gets a little bit more palatable maybe, So yeah, geographic expansion is probably number 1 on the list. I do feel like we're a little at capacity here in Cleveland. It does continue to grow every single year, but do I think we can get to 70 airplanes in the Cleveland market? Probably not.
Gotcha.
Right? So if we do want to get to 70 airplanes, I would love to have 3 or 4 airplanes in the Pittsburgh market and 3 or 4 airplanes in the Columbus market and 3 or 4 airplanes in the Nashville market, whatever it might be. And it's hard to get into that market. You're either going to buy a small company like ours, maybe a 3 or 4 aircraft operator, imply a lot of the economies of scale that we've sort of learned, a lot of our software that we already paid for to try to relieve them of that expense and make it a little bit more efficient down there. So that would be our primary goal. But, it's a tough M&A market a lot of times, right? And you're taking a risk. It's like, do we really believe that those people made 27% profit margins? And can they really fly 7 airplanes with 6 people on staff? It's like, wait a minute, we fly 20 airplanes, we have 70 pilots, so this math, doesn't work. So obviously we can't operate it the way that we operate SkyQuest. So that starts to put our antennas up. And I'm very optimistic that we will continue to grow through geographic expansion. I love it. And I think, quite frankly, the way it'll happen is one of our owners who loves working with us will probably, move to Nashville and say, hey, I'll take my plane.
Sure.
And we'll query our pilots. Hey, do we have 2 pilots that want to move to Nashville? And we'll probably get 10 that say, I'm in, And they'll move down there and they'll fly for them. And when they do, it'll remain on our charter certificate. We'll slowly ramp up that charter area. And the way that it spread here in SkyQuest was the people in the back who are the charter clients are like, wait, how does this program work? I want my own plane. So we'll do that then down there,
I'm laughing to myself over here because we started by saying common sense ownership. You were being all humble. That was a business question. I like to talk about flying. And then in the past 2 minutes when I asked you that question, I think economies of scale, profit margin, geographic expansion, all these Wharton MBA words that you said weren't your cup of tea, you're throwing out there. It's funny because it does go to show you've run this business for 25 years now. Starting at the foundational level, understanding how everything works, but then moving yourself into a different role where now you're building out what you did on an individual level across 130 people now. And that's really the story that a lot of our business owners and especially the founder owners share is that that crossroads that you come to eventually is how do I duplicate this? How do I repeat this process and scale it in a way that other people can do it and we can offer this to a larger market? And it's not unique to SkyQuest. It's not unique to the aviation industry. That's just business ownership. And in your case, that's common sense business ownership. That's why I love these conversations because we could be talking about dramatically different industries, dramatically different geographies, size and scope of businesses, but the common threads are always the same. One of the questions that I always want to ask people toward the end of the interview is what I didn't ask or something I could have touched on that will be valuable to the audience.
I guess nothing that I could think of. I mean, I would just like to make sure that, if people want to get more information on SkyQuest, obviously they could go to our website. It's just flyskyquest.com.
It's a fun website to peruse. I'll link it in the show notes because you can see, oh, there's an empty leg. I might be going to Naples because that's a tasty price for the experience that you would have.
People think, oh my gosh, that's never going to work out. And the reason a lot of times it doesn't is because somebody's like, well, I see you have an empty leg like 3 weeks from now, and we sell that to you for a discounted price, but then the other leg cancels. So now, we can't do that because we want to honor what we told you. And now, we're going to lose money doing this thing unless we are able to resell it. So, but yes, on short notice, on 2 or 3 days notice, like if you're really flexible, or the way that I'd really like to see it work is you have your trip on the book. You're coming home from your home in Naples on Thursday of whatever week, let's just say. We wind up with an empty leg on Friday. So let's say we were going to deadhead down to pick you up on Thursday, but we were already dropping somebody else down near Naples on Friday. So I would love, and this is what works well for people, is I'll call you up and say, I'll give you 40% off, 30% off, or whatever. If you can move your day back a day, do you have that flexibility? And if you don't, because, geez, I wish I would love to save X amount of money, but I have a business meeting. No problem. We'll take good care of you. We'll honor it. But a lot of people love that phone call, and they're like, you know what? Let me just make one phone call, and we'll come home Friday. I heard the weather's terrible up there.
40% sounds good to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's a win-win, right? It's a win for them. It's a win for us. It's a win for the aircraft owner. It's just a lot of efficiency there. So.
You were so generous to take me through the hangar, and I loved seeing the huge machines. Obviously, that's one of my favorite parts. Whenever I go somewhere, I always ask if I can get a factory floor tour or something like that. You pulled out all the stops. One of the most impressive parts, though, was actually the office space. Every corner that I turned, there was just more people in more desks, and the boiler room that was the scheduling area where people are just making sure that flights are being logistically sound and you can fill these empty legs. That operation was so impressive to me. I'd have to imagine that's one of the areas that AI and the softwares that we're talking about can really help make even more efficient and really boost those people to 2x or 3x or 5x their productivity.
Let's hope so. It's tough. I mean, it's just a changing, like we just said. One guy's going to cancel, and now that whole other flight is messed up. Like that happens daily.
Sure.
And we have an amazing team of people in there, and I kind of, we have a concierge people on sort of one end, then we have sales people through one section, and then we basically have the crewing, crew scheduling type people. So, some people's job is to put the trip on the books, but then well, who the heck is going to fly it? And you have to look through all these things. Well, how many days has Jordan worked last month? How many days has Corey worked last month? Oh, it's been 3 days since he's worked. What's the fairest thing to do? And it's a lot of work, and we want to make sure that we have an amazing job for the pilots, the mechanics, the dispatchers, everybody. We don't want anybody to think that they're being taken advantage of. So we work really hard at that. And then once it's crewed and on the schedule and stuff, it goes to our services department. And they're kind of like, hey, do you have any oversized bags that we should know about? Would you like any catering? What's your ground transportation? Be happy to set you up with a rental car and all that stuff. And then the second you leave, we call down there. Is the rental car here? Okay, it's under so-and-so's name. Can you please pull it out to the plane for us? Oh, no problem. So we have people calling every time the flight's going on and monitoring that flight and just making sure that if we can control the service level on the flight, we really want to.
The last question I'll leave you with, because it's open-ended and I kind of like it. What's been your favorite part of the journey? 25 years, again, 1 to 130, 50 to 50K to 100 million. A lot of different phases. You're entering that maturity phase, or you're in that maturity phase that you talked about. Was the growth part fun? Is the maturity part fun? Or has nothing to do with the company growth itself and has something to do with just being part of the experience?
Yeah, I mean, the recognition is amazing, but at the end of the day, my favorite part, and I actually told this to, a pilot that I was flying with yesterday, because I actually still fly the airplane about 1 day a week. I just want to stay in, and it helps me stay relevant with those guys and stuff. And I was flying with him, and he said, he's like, yeah, it's so cold. He goes, I just realized all my windows in my house are just so drafty. And I'm like, oh, geez, did you get a new house? He goes, yeah, I just bought a new house, last month or whatever. So I'm in there just constantly working on it and fixing up things. And it's like, that just makes me swell with pride because, I watch people have kids and provide for their kids. And I watch somebody like that, that's gone through the process and has enough money now through hard work that I've done or whatever to own their own home, and granted they could get there another way, but quite frankly,
but they didn't.
They didn't. I mean, and that's 130 people. right now that are relying on SkyQuest, I take it very, very seriously. But it's been one of the most amazing things for me is empowering, the younger generation and the people like my managers and stuff to lead, make smart decisions, do it better than I do it, to really, not control them, but to give them, some leeway so that they can make something. I go, geez, I wouldn't have done it that way. And I might make it vocal that I wouldn't have, but then let's see how it works out. It might work out better.
Corey Head, SkyQuest, all-time good guy for re-recording with me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And you're the best. I hope to play some golf with you this summer because that'll be a full circle moment, right?
Yes. It seems far away right now. They look out there.
It was 13 degrees under, below zero this morning when I woke up.
Well, I appreciate you, and next time it's my treat. So thank you, Jordan.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Corey.
Price Discovery Money and Mindset is brought to you by Wernick Spear Wealth Managers and Chagrin Valley Business Strategies. Opinions expressed by Jordan and guests are their own and do not represent investment advice, solicitation, or the like. For more information and resources referenced in this episode, be sure to check out the show notes. Thank you and see you next time.